My name's Ann Queeran. I'm with Publications Management Division, and before we get started, I want to introduce the team members that are here today. We have Ms. Gail Gibson, who's our division chief. Do you want to?
Let me do this.
Yes.
I feel like I should. Anne and Joyce and Vicki, she's new. They're on our editing staff. Okay, some of you we know, some of you we don't know. Then we have Jody and Debbie and Laurie. They are in records management and FOIA. So when you hear these names thrown around all the time, these are who we're talking about. And with those other editors over there, but these are the ones who pretty much worked on this presentation. And Anne, she teleworks from Arizona, but wonderful instructor. So anyway, go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Gibson. And we just want to let you know that we're here because the senior leadership of the center has asked us to develop training for technical writing, and we were asked by Ms. Solano, and that's, she's not here. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. To develop a companion piece for the administrative personnel, and it's just great to have. This is the largest group we've had so far, and we're excited to be able to speak to you today. Okay, as Ms. Gibson mentioned, I telework from Arizona, but I'm from this area. I'm familiar with the area, and I'm always glad to come back and spend some time here. And we are working on site for a few weeks to present the workshops. And so if you have any questions for me, I'm here until July 15th. And I can be reached by phone or email at other times. These are our numbers here on first slide, and we'll get going here. So these are some of the items that Ms. Solano had targeted for areas that people have frequent questions about: letterhead, margins, page numbers, running headers, signature blocks, and spacing. We're going to touch on all of those today. We are not here to give a how-to class per se on any one item, but an overview of some of the common problem areas. So we want to let you know that if you have specific questions, please get in touch with us, and we'll be glad to speak with you on the phone or come over to your desk and help you with any questions or problems you might have. Okay, next. These are some of the publications that you may, I would assume you're familiar with, some, or if not most. A lot of these are what cross our desk. The one caveat we want to give you this today is that the MOAs and MOUs are still in development as far as the details of the formatting of those. So you'll hear us say that a couple of times. So we aren't going to be going into too much detail on those today. But when it becomes available, you will have it. We'll get it out to you. Now, we're also aware that some of you, and just to see a show of hands, how many of you actually review technical reports? We know some of our admin folks do. So we are going to be, thank you, we're going to be touching on some of those areas today as well. And here are your resources. And I just want to mention that the regulation, the second one from the top, 25-30, am I blocking you, ladies? Okay. 25-30-2 is under revision, but it is still your go-to guide for publications in the center. We have the, you'll notice the former name is there. And that will also be distributed when it becomes available. That and the technical report format are under revision. And the rest of these you're probably mostly already familiar with. And the first part of our workshop, which we taught in 2015, is also available on the YouTube channel for the center. The link is there, and if you click on the YouTube icon, you know, on the intranet homepage, you'll see it in the list. Now, you should have received via email, and I see that some of you printed them out, which is great. We had provided also 2 supplemental handouts that we will not be going through in the class because we have an hour. We will be working to get through the slides and answer questions in that time. However, we want to thank Jody Rush, who's with us this afternoon, for these two handouts, which we updated to reflect some of the changes that have occurred since the 2550 came out 2 years ago. So some of you may have received this handout in 2013, and now we've updated it, so that is what you received from Daryl, and I think that was, yeah. She also gave you the report cover sheet, and I think there was a fourth. Oh, the fourth item was the PMD style tool, which was some quick tips. That's the landscape document. So if you have questions about any of those supplemental materials, just get in touch, and we'll be glad to help you out with any questions on those. So that's a lot of material that you've received at one time. So we're going to focus on the presentation today. Next, okay. What we're going to do today is point to areas that will help you resolve problems with different aspects of military correspondence. The first one being the letterhead. And the thing to know about the center's letterhead is that it's available to you on the P drive. If you're not aware of that, we'll just mention that again today. And we have the link on the next slide, I believe. Yeah, P-Forms 2015 letterhead. The nice thing about this is it is there, it's already created for you. So you don't have to do anything to it. In fact, we really don't want you to do anything to it because it has been set up for you based on the APD letterhead template. So if you see anything that differs from this, it is not correct. This is the center's letterhead. Any question on that? Okay. Can we back up to that first letterhead slide? There we go. I know you all have this in your handout. I just wanted to reemphasize that we have developed our information from different publications. So AR 2550, 2530, and DAPAM 2540 all have valuable information on these areas. So just wanted to point that out. And now we can go ahead. These are the standard margins. And one thing to keep in mind that and I realize I may be preaching to the choir on a lot of these areas, but I'm not sure of the level of experience in the room. So you may hear things that are familiar, or you may hear things that are new. But the key point here is that you know the difference between margins and header and footer, which are not the same. So for the letterhead page is unique in that it has the 1.5 top margin.
I think it's 0.5.
Is that a typo? It's 0.
That's the header.
No.
0.5. Yes. Yes.
You're okay.
The header is 0.5. The margin is 1.5.
Thank you. Yeah, this is what I mean about confusing the two. The margin is the amount of space around your text, and the header and footer are set for the top and bottom, and that is where we have some confusion sometimes. Yeah. I just want to mention also that running headers is not listed as running headers in the reg. It's called
Headers and footers.
yeah, it's in the headers and footers, and it's the subject line that you repeat across the top of the page. And we refer to running header, you may as well. Any questions on this page? Okay. Okay. Everybody's up to speed on 2 spaces after a period, and also 2 blank spaces after a colon. The paragraph on spacing also talks a little bit about guidance for active voice and correcting wordiness. We're going to go into those in a little more detail. And then the other item, the signature block, chapter 6. Yes, sure. We need to get the mic to you, though.
Okay, I think what I see the most when we're reviewing correspondence, because I work a lot with the admin policy documents in the organization, is when you go to that second page, the headers and footers are still stuck at point 5 and point 5. And they've got to be changed to point 1 and point 1. Okay, so that's, even though, and you need to put a section break next page, you know, to block that off on the first page to go to the second page. We see a lot of just carrying over, and so your margins are not holding what they should be on the second page and throughout the rest of the document.
Right, because in your page layout, you have the option, you have the first page, then you have the odd and even. And if you don't put that section break in there before the rest of your memorandum or your pub, then you're going to have that same repeated throughout. And another way to check that is if your link to previous is highlighted, then you're going to be linked to the previous header, footer, and your document will repeat those unless you put in a section break and then change those margins. So thank you, Ms. Gibson. Everyone clear on that? If we're talking Greek, let us know. Thank you, Joyce. Okay. Is there anyone who has not heard of the Plain Language Act of 2010, which really goes back to 1998 if you've been around a while? And it's updated from time to time. And the key point here is that we want to use clear government communication that the public can understand and use. Why is that important? Why do we care if the public can read and understand our communication?
Plain language.
Plain language. And who are our customers? Are all of our customers DOD or DA entities?
No.
Right. No, they are not. So we want to keep that in mind. Always keep in mind your audience. Where is your publication going? Who's going to read it? Who's going to make a decision based on this information, if that's the case? And that is the key behind the plain language. Now, it does not mean that we are dumbing down our communications. It does mean we are going to try to get away from the what we used to call gobbledygook back in the day, or army speak, you might hear it referred to. And we want to use logical organization, active voice, common everyday words, meaning familiar language, not language that is so technical or specific to a certain field that a broader audience would not recognize it. Shorter sentences, pronouns when appropriate, and design features such as headings, tables, and lists to organize the material. It does not include the items you see in the right-hand column. And when we say using common everyday words, it doesn't mean oversimplify. So we do want to remember we're not, we're not writing to third graders, for example. We might be writing to eighth graders, but generally we want to use language that we know our audience is going to be familiar with. Jargon used to also be, taboo. We could not use jargon. And that, I'm happy to say, has changed because, again, if your audience is familiar with the terminology, then it's acceptable. So keep in mind who your audience is, and that's your guideline there. Okay. Yes. Thank you. Did you print out your packets with the notes? There are a few notes. If you didn't, you can go back to the electronic copy and pick those up. But on page 10 of your packet, these are just the 3 key points from the Plain Language Act itself. Communicate in a clear, concise, and correct manner. Ensure that the readers understand the content the first time, and ensure that they can find what they need, understand it, and use it to meet their needs. So why is it important that our readers understand the communication the first time? Any thoughts? Well, when you receive something in the mail, say you get a letter from BG&E that says the rates are going up. I don't know about you, but they're going up in Arizona. They go up all the time. So what do you want to know from that piece of communication? I want to know how much and when, right? So I don't want to have to read that letter 4 times to find out in the last paragraph, oh, it's effective 1 September 2016, and oh, it's going to be, an 8% increase or something like that. So if we can't find that information right away, what is happening? Our time's being wasted, and we're frustrated because, like, well, where's the information? Where's what I want to know? So keep that in mind for your communications, that the person on the receiving end is going to be looking for certain information and will want to get to it as quickly as possible and not have to weed through a lot of unnecessary detail to get there. So, and that ties into our next slide, which is our bottom line up front, which has also been a concept that's been around for a while, to put your key topic. It used to be, if you're an English 101 person, it'd be your topic sentence, and you want to put that at the beginning of the communication. Support it with your key information, and in the case of a technical report, we're including recommendations and conclusions. In our technical workshop, the emphasis this year is on correlating findings and discussion with recommendations and conclusions. And if you review technical reports or publications that include those sections, we have some more information we can provide you. The key there is just to make sure that the publication does what it's supposed to do. Does it give the decision maker the information that he or she needs? And is that supported? And I wanted to mention, it's on the slide, that inverted pyramid is part of the CES module for Army writing. It's lesson 2.2. And there's a lot of good material. And in fact, we could have, if we'd had 3 hours, we could lift that whole lesson out. But if you haven't accessed that resource yet, you may want to and review those modules. I think that was the basic course. So let's talk about choosing our words carefully. Is everyone aware of the prohibition about shall? And we're now using must or must not, as opposed to shall and shall not. This is also part of the Federal Plain Language Guidelines. And our last bullet is a particular favorite of one of our team, which is to replace in accordance with according to.
Oh, yes.
That's Gail's. We've all been working, and myself included, we've all been working on that one. Old habits die hard, right? Acronyms can continue to be a challenge. The key resource now that we can point you to is the ABCA list, which is on the APD website. In the past, we would have referred you to the RMDA website. This list is now known as ABCA. So that is abbreviations, brevity codes, and acronyms. Headings and subheadings to organize content, and we are striving to keep those at 3 or 4 levels. What happens if you go beyond the 4th level? I hear some answers out there. Yes?
It's hard to keep track of.
It's hard to keep track of the material. Exactly right, right. And again, if you think of who's using that material, if somebody's trying to go refer back to some information, it can be really a challenge to find. Well, it's in 1.1.2.3 you know. So we want to try and keep it to 3 or 4 levels maximum. Eliminating it is and there are constructions will help with wordiness. And this, I see this I think almost every day we see these constructions. There were several changes submitted during the recent review of the project. Well, there are a couple of problems with that. In addition to there were several changes. Do we know who submitted those changes? No clue, right? So it's a good example also of passive voice. We don't have anyone named who's performing that action. So the revised version, we've added that party. The panel members submitted several changes during the recent project review. So a few less words and a little more information. Okay. These are like some of our very favorite phrases from all kinds of Army writing. You may be familiar with those. And I'm happy to say the trend has improved, that we are getting away from those. But depending on where you work and who you support, you may still see some of these phrases around. So we have a whole list of the sort of the top 10 of phrases we can replace with shorter words or eliminate altogether, depending on the context. These look familiar? I hope they don't, because that means that maybe they've gone away. But they're still floating around out there. Okay, next. Lists help us not only organize our material, but they help visually, they help the reader find information. Especially if you're dealing with something, say an SOP that has steps that need to be in chronological order. They make it easy for the reader to identify those steps. Adding blank space for easy reading. Again, the visually groups material into organized chunks, if you will, of information. And the key with using lists is that we want to make sure we have a lead-in sentence, we indent the list, and we use parallel construction. What do we mean by parallel construction? The beginning of each of these happens to be a good example. When we say always, indent, and use, you see how these have all been started the same way. So if we changed one of these and said, you know, parallel construction should be used, it would not match these other two. So that's what we mean by parallel construction. Also, it's easier to follow the flow of the list. Okay. And here's a good example. This actually came out of a document that we encountered. And this is one sentence. And the revision is a list with 5 different elements in it. So if you see a sentence that's a 1 paragraph sentence, or there's material that can be pulled out, as in this case, by all means, feel free to put it into a list. And someone asked this morning, is it okay to use bulleted lists? It certainly is. And if you need any help with those, just let us know. So if you were the reader and you received this. Do you think you might need to read it more than once to get this out of here? You're right. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So, very good. And we'll be focusing the next few slides on active and passive voice. And as per 2550, active voice emphasizes the actor, or as we say, the doer of the sentence, shows who or what is doing the action, performing the action, puts that actor before the verb, and creates shorter sentences. Now, this is a very basic example. The test was passed by Sergeant Jones. The way we identify that passive construction is you have a form of the verb to be, the helping verb, and your ed or past participle form of the verb. And so who took the test? Sergeant Jones. Let's put him at the beginning of the sentence ahead of the verb. Sergeant Jones passed the test. And in doing so, we've got a slightly shorter sentence that's more concise, more clear. Okay, next. The personnel director approved your leave. Shorter, more direct than your leave was approved by so-and-so. And another form, which is what we call acceptable passive, is it necessary to identify who approved the leave?
No.
No. So you can say your leave has been approved. So the trick is knowing when that is acceptable and when it's not. And usually it's acceptable in cases like this when it's not important to identify who's performing that action. We have another slide on that coming up. Next, we have appropriate personal protective equipment, or PPE, will be worn by all personnel. Who's going to wear that equipment? All personnel. Let's put them up front. Will wear appropriate personal protective equipment. Depending on the context of your publication, we have another form of correcting that, which is what we call the directive or the imperative style. That means we take the verb right out of there and put it at the beginning of the sentence. For example, if this were in an SOP where you're directing action throughout, this is a style that can be used in that context. How many of you work with this style of writing? Imperative, directive? So it's something that you can keep in mind for future use. It cuts down on wordiness also. Okay, let's go on. Now, some of you who may be reviewing technical reports or scientific writing will find that a lot of it will include passive voice. Some of it we can keep, and some of it we can't. But the trick is in knowing that we want to eliminate any bias in the writing. We want to keep it objective. And to do that sometimes requires eliminating the actor, removes personal actions or opinions. So our first sentence is the passive example, the original sentence. And this is one interpretation, and we believe. So the team or whomever is preparing this report, they believe that the chemical caused pollution. Well, that's okay in terms of being active voice, but it implies an opinion. So in order to keep it active but eliminate that, we can say the data suggest the chemical caused the pollution. Then it's objective and it's more clear. Any questions on that? Okay, next. And here are some more examples. These are from a professional journal article that we reviewed not too long ago. Test results must be interpreted. The data should be made available. And those are fine because in both cases, we don't need to identify a doer, a specific doer in those sentences. And the bottom two are from an environmental baseline survey. Where we don't need to know who added the buildings to the street. You know, it's not like we have to say ABC Construction Company added an office at a machine shop or whatever. So our key here is that in most types of writing, we want to eliminate the passive constructions, but there are cases when it is acceptable in scientific writing and technical writing. Next. And this is just a summary of how to eliminate it. Place the actor before the verb. Use that imperative or directive style. And then we also wanted to spend a minute talking about eliminating spelling and other errors. Are you all aware that you really can't trust Word all the time? I think we have a consensus on that. You can't always trust the green squiggly lines either. But there's terminology that Word does not recognize, and it will underline it in red. You know, scientific terms, other types of terminology, and the trick to eliminating those is to do what? Look it up. Add it to the dictionary. You right click on it, select Add to Dictionary, and you know sometimes we see chemical names that are this long, and it could be anything. And that's how to get them into your dictionary, and then they're in there, and you won't keep seeing those. But the other point I want to make is that by focusing on these ideas that we're talking about today, you will be better prepared to recognize problems. You won't need to rely on Word quite as much, maybe, and you'll be able to make those corrections on your own. And of course, and Mr. Resta himself has pointed out to us that he has seen publications with spelling errors. Now, I don't know how, and I think he was speaking more on the technical side than the admin side, but there is no logical excuse for anything to go forward with a spelling error in it. We have the spell check and the grammar check tools at our disposal. We also have research and thesaurus tools to help with word choice, synonyms, definitions, and so forth. Yes, we have a question. Could you tell us your name first?
Kelly Floyd.
Kelly.
Going back to the spelling, I did actually encounter something where the word was actually a correctly spelled word, but it was used improperly in the sentence, but it never picked it up.
Yes.
So that it was something that, you know, ended up going forward. It wasn't actually here at work, but it was actually a personal paper I was writing. And it ended up, the wrong usage was in the sentence.
That's a very good point, because we also have things in English called homonyms, right? So you have the word there. We have three different theirs, right? There, there, and there. So Word doesn't pick those up as spelling errors. That's what we call a usage error, and it won't pick those up. So that's a great example. Thank you. Yes, we see those kinds of things fairly regularly. Okay, next. Okay. Now, this is a new slide this year and we're talking to both the technical and the admin groups about version control. And the key here is to make sure that if you're sending something, and this not necessarily to PMD, but if you're sending something to another person for peer review, for example, the best way to keep track of it is to put your initials at the end of the file name. When we have folks who are revising ARs, DAPMs, TB meds, what unfortunately frequently happens with us is that they will go to some old file that they have that was not the final published version of that publication. And if they're not working from the final corrected version, we really don't know what they're working on. So we ask that people contact us if they need the most recent version of a publication. That can include APHC publications as well. That way you're working from the most current one. And then we want to make sure we add our initials to the file name. So if you send it to me and I review it, I'm going to put AQ at the end. And then if it goes back and forth, we add the additional initials for the reviewer. So that way we know what we're working on. The time and date stamp are helpful, but they're not always reliable either, because sometimes things will go back and forth in the same day, especially if somebody needs it today, which happens to all of us. So that's a key thing to remember. Yes, Joyce is going to
add something to that. Okay. What happens sometimes is that a publication will provide you with a file. You send it to us, we review it, and we're putting our initials to it. When it's coming back to you, what you don't realize is there's some grammatical changes that we might take, like if there's one space after a period and there should be two, which we all know, we correct it. If you're numbering 1, 2, 4, we correct it to 1, 2, 3. So there's some editorial things that we do in the office that we don't use track changes or we don't highlight. We just go ahead and we change it. It could be an oversight, and we know that those things can happen. But what we don't want you to do is we don't want you to use our file and go back to the file that you originally sent to us, look at our other track changes, like if we want a technical content, if we want to change a word, or we're going to change the paragraphs. Those things we definitely are going to ask and point out to you, and then you can make your changes accordingly. But if you don't use our file, then you don't have that current updated file. And what we do see on occasion is that a project officer will take our file, compare it to what they originally sent to us, make changes to his or her original file, and now you've lost the most current version. So I just wanted to point that out. It's really important. Use the file that we send back to you. If you still have changes and questions for us, that's fine. You put your initials to that file, and that continues to be the working file. Any questions or confusion? Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Joyce.
I'm going to make a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we're going to be going into a new name change again. And we're going to have to be redoing all our admin policies and, the PAMs and regs and everything. I am requesting on the admin side or business ops to please contact me first for the file. We probably, unless it's a new document, we have the old version of that file in Word. It's already set up in the formatting. Get it from me. I will send it to you. We'll work back and forth in that file. A lot of times I just get some project officer. It's not usually the admin, it's the project officer who's doing it on his own, and it looks, I spend days sometimes, and frankly, I don't have that kind of time. So please contact me. We'll get you the right file, and we'll work from that file from then on, okay?
It saves everybody's time, and it gets the project finished a lot sooner. Question up front? We had a comment up front?
Gail, in that respect, a lot of times the secretaries are not being included on the return documentation. So therefore, the project officer does take it, and we don't know what they've done with it. And from the directorate secretary level, we can only go back to the secretary. If they're not receiving it and knowing what's going on, then we're all in trouble.
That's a very good point. And we're addressing that also in our technical workshop for those project officers to ensure that they have that most recent version. Yes, we understand. We feel your pain. Was there someone in the back?
Hi, most of you already know me. I'm Samantha. I have actually 3 questions. This is within my directorate. This was asked down when we're doing reports, just general correspondence. The first one, I know that families, soldiers, and civilians are very unique capitalization, but when we're talking about DA civilians, on our actual transmittal side of the house, do we use it as in general, like such and such civilians to assist them in health environment? Are we capitalizing this even though it stands out and it's just a general public acknowledgement of civilians?
That is a very good question. If you are referring to DA civilians or DOD civilians,
Yes,
you
ma'am.
will capitalize the C.
Okay,
And if you're not, then we don't.
there we go. Second question. Actually today, one of my other program secretary, she submitted a report. We have actual memorandum. It's more of like a memorandum, not an actual physical technical report, but it's just a database. It's done for MCOM side of the house. It's a data reading. They are certain enclosures on there. I know that from tracking, just learning through the last year here, through senior secretary, anytime we have enclosure listed, generally we are supposed to pencil it in, enclosure 1, enclosure 2, yada yada. But we already annotated on our memorandum side of the house. Can we still electronically type it in? Because most of these files are sent via PDF. So that could be the secondary to instead of writing enclosure, correct?
What you can do there is if they are named in the document, in the memorandum, then you need only put the word in that corner.
Okay.
Enclosure, singular or plural.
Yes, ma'am.
But you do not need to list them again. Is
Are
that?
you handwriting at
does
the
that-
bottom of that enclosure page, like enclosure 1, enclosure 2?
Yes, Ms. Gal. What if you send it electronically to the customer?
I type it in because
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
that's old school, writing in pencil. Type it in because you don't want to lose it.
Right, right, and if you, yeah, it's funny how some of those things haven't caught up to electronic communication. Yeah,
Then in that case, I mean, you know, junior level secretaries need to be told. We need to be told. We know, we can't take for granted that if the 25-50 is telling us to do something and
standard practice is different.
Yes.
Exactly.
Standard
Right.
practice is
Right.
different.
Right,
Because actually that was my document yesterday, and I spent over a half an hour trying to search
Yes.
Google looking for anything to say.
We were talking about that.
Whether it's supposed to say enclosure, if it's supposed to say enclosure on the first page, and then you number the pages after. The only thing it wanted to say is to list enclosure
Closure.
on the signature, underneath
Right.
the signature block.
well, if you take a look at the 2 supplements that were sent out this morning, they cover that.
Oh,
There are a lot of the nuts and bolts
Jane, still alive.
of these details that are in those supplemental handouts. And these are things that frequently do come up. And they'll drive you crazy. I mean, to spend half an hour or an hour on a little admin item. Debbie has a comment in the back.
I would just say the common rule is if you're doing correspondence and you're sending the hard copies out, you are to write enclosure 1, enclosure 2, or whatever it is. If you're sending it out electronically, then, understandably, you would type that on there.
If you're doing both, then you would do both. You would pencil, yes, on the hard copy. Right.
That's gonna cause a problem for the simple reason is they're signing electronically now,
Exactly.
okay? So most of our
Yeah.
correspondence is going out electronically. So now you're talking about whiting out the typed in enclosed 1, or now you gotta remove it from your originally
Yeah.
signed, which is bad.
Well, for practical purposes, I think we'd be safe to go on record and saying you can type that in. Because to go back and then use whiteout and then, that's crazy.
Yeah, because once a document is signed, it's signed. You're not supposed to check
That's right.
anything in.
That is absolutely right. Was there a comment in the back?
No, I said Jody said it was that if you type it, that's
I
what
said
you
if you
do.
type it, just type it, you know, I mean.
Right.
Don't go back and change it.
Yeah, I mean, there are, we get down to logic and practicality, and hopefully common sense will kick in. But it hasn't always caught up to the published regs yet. Very good. And
One last very
oh, you had three.
question.
That's right. She had three.
Okay, one very last simple question. Anytime we're using any type of acronym, let's say the Army Public Health Center Provisional, but when we're shortcutting it as an acronym, do we always have to have the APHC prob, or can we still use APHC so-and-so? Because there's both ways to this. I've seen correspondence with that, without the, and one with the. For my sanity, since I've worked here, consistency is the word, is the, anytime you are utilizing an acronym in front of a big proper noun, which is the Army Public Health Center. That's my question, is the.
It is acceptable to
Okay.
begin a sentence with an acronym.
Okay.
And that is according to the Army Publishing Directorate.
Only in technical reports.
And technical reports.
Not correspondence.
All right,
Yep.
so that would refer, so that, okay, thank you very much. So that is on a technical report. So on.
Use the mic.
So for the memorandum, then you would put the, okay? For the technical report, you could use the, but you also can use the acronym at the beginning of the sentence, okay? And you have to remember, you need to remember correspondence and technical publications follow two separate regs. If you're writing a memorandum, you're using AR 25-50. If you're writing a technical publication, whether it be a technical report, a tech guide, then you are using AR 25-30. And unfortunately, sometimes they butt heads. That's the easiest way to put it.
And if you're working both sides of the house, as some of you are, that's your challenge. Yes.
So for correspondence that comes through when you're using the acronym, that is in front of it. So just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. That was it.
That's found in the AR 25-50, page 3. It's under,
AR 25-50, page 3.
114, it's under, it says a way to begin next sentence with an acronym and using them in the subject line.
Paragraph 114.
Paragraph 114. Paragraph 114, yes. So if you want to jot that down, AR 25-50, paragraph 1-14. Page 3. Paragraph B2. Bingo.
B2. Good. All right, very good. Thanks for those questions. And we'll continue on, which is to thank you for coming. These are the key points we hope we were able to shed some light on for you today. And we have one more. One more. There we go. We'd appreciate your questions and feedback. If you have areas that we didn't cover today that are important to you and your work, let us know and we can address them. If you have suggestions for the presentation or any feedback for us, we'd be really happy to hear from you. We did receive some helpful feedback last week from somebody that we know well. And we want to also thank our team back there, everybody who contributed to the presentation. Any questions before we leave? We have extra time. We have the room until 3 o'clock if anyone has a concern or a question they'd like to discuss. But this ends the official portion of our presentation. Okay, thank you for coming.